Let's finally sew this coat, shall we? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marie, and as promised in the last video, we're finally sewing a wool coat. And I have to say, the coat has been ready for 2 or 3 weeks now, and I love it so much. I'm making the Traveler coat by Bella Loves Patterns. I chose this pattern for a variety of reasons. You can see all of that in the last video. But long story short, I really love the design details and I really love the instructions. Very elaborate, very comprehensive, doesn't leave any blanks, and that's why I chose that pattern. What's that? You want to see the coat now? At the beginning of the video? We'll make a deal. I'll show you the coat now, and then you stay until the end, because then I will show you some like secret hidden details. Is that a good deal? Let me get the coat. Oh my god! Here she is! I'm so happy with it. Big pockets, very comfortable, nice length. It has a big collar, cool undercollar, and I think it looks great. If you saw last video, you will have seen the whole struggle about fitting the coat into the fabric. But for now, let's rewind to the end of 2025, where I started sewing this coat. Okay, I'm a bit warm now. In case you're interested, I am wearing a handmade jumper, not by me, but by my wonderful mum. I also love how it looks with the coat. And I will put the details if you're curious about like the wool and the pattern, in case you're a knitter. Or if you have a wonderful mother that can knit sweaters for you as well. Anyway, rewind. So I'll take you back to the 28th of December 2025, the day I started sewing. And friends, this pattern does not mess around. It immediately lets you start off with the front dart and the front pockets. So everything that's right on display when you wear the coat, you start off with that. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, it's really nice to start off with something so significant for the coat, because it really gives you an idea of how it will turn out. On the other hand, it was a little bit intimidating. But then again, the pattern does try and hold you by the hand and take you along with all of these steps. So first, the front dart. That was very straightforward. So there were not really any problems there. Then came the pockets. So they're welt pockets, and the pattern does suggest to make like a trial version, which I did, and I'm very happy I did. I would highly recommend to do that. Even if you've made a lot of welt pockets already, I think it's good because every fabric is different, every construction is a little bit different, and it's nice to see how your fabric reacts, how it presses, how it sews together. So I would really suggest doing that, and then you can also be a little bit more confident when you go into making the actual pockets. So I'm very glad I slowed down and made a little trial version. So I will say, even though in general the pattern instructions are very comprehensive, there were times where I was a little bit confused, but I did find a very useful YouTube video. It's not an official sew-along by the pattern designer. It's just a person that was very generous with their time and made a step-by-step video about sewing this particular coat. And that was very helpful to kind of see someone make it in real time. I will link that video so you can have a little look as well. In total, those first steps of the dart and the pocket took me about 4 hours. In general, the construction wasn't super intuitive for me. I managed to do it in the end, but I did have to freestyle a little bit here and there. Maybe I missed some of the instructions or I misinterpreted some of the instructions. In the end, I managed to make them, and I'm very glad I did have a trial version first. And let's just say I'm happy that the coat is lined so that all of my messy stitching can be hidden away for nobody to see ever again. Then it was the new year. You'll notice that I managed to pick up this project every now and again. Every few days I would work on it, and I was really having a lot of fun because after finishing those pockets I was getting a bit more confident and I couldn't wait to see what the rest of the coat would look like. So yeah, I managed to pick it up quite often, sometimes for very short, sometimes for a long period of time, and that really helped again to have that momentum going. And the next sewing session was on the 2nd of January, starting off the year strong. And that was a session where a lot of the real coat making techniques were popping up. And some of these were really things that I had never done before. For example, you have to baste the vents closed so everything stays nice in place. You baste your sleeves before sewing them. Yeah, all of these things really help to get a professional finish. And these would be things that I cut corners on usually, but I set myself the goal of not doing that. And I think it really did pay off. Also, I started using the clapper. This is a clapper, if you don't know. It's basically a wooden block for pressing seams. This one was made by my partner. He's a woodworker and he made this beautiful clapper. I was able to give him the exact measurements and the feel that I wanted, so what a luxury. And I wasn't sure how often I would use this, and in the end I used this all the time. And I do think this has changed my sewing forever, not to be dramatic. So when you sew a coat, you apply a lot of steam. It makes the fibers and the fabric relax a little bit, and the fibers quite malleable. And then as it cools again, it sets into shape. And because of your clapper being there, it really keeps the shape that you want. You have less chance of it bouncing back up because your clapper made sure it was lying nice and flat. I'm honestly quite surprised at how much of a difference it made to have those very clean, crisp seams. So yeah, I will use this again. I can see myself using this a lot in denim sewing as well, or with like heavier canvases. It really does make a difference to make it look nice and professional, I think. And, you know, bonus points because my boyfriend made it for me. So this is very special. You'll see that in some parts I am pressing the seams with a piece of extra cloth. The pattern will tell you to use a piece of offcut of your wool fabric when you press on the right side of your fabric. I kind of misread that first and I used a piece of offcut for every seam that I was pressing, which was completely unnecessary. And it took me a while to realize that. So you'll see in the videos that I'm also using that on the wrong side of the fabric. yeah, that wasn't really necessary. But you live and you learn, and now I know only use an offcut piece of wool when you press on the right side of your fabric, which makes, again, complete sense. So another tool that is mentioned and asked for in the pattern is a tailor's ham, to have like rounded seams, but also as a help when forming the collar. That's something I didn't use. Instead, I just rolled up some fabric and used that as a help. And honestly, that was perfectly fine. So I don't think I will be making or buying a tailor's ham anytime soon. Maybe if I start making a lot of tailored items, maybe, but I don't think that's the case. So for me, a rolled up piece of heavy fabric did the trick. So I sewed for about 3.5 hours and I got quite a lot done. And then 2 days later, on the 4th of January, I kept going. And the next thing on the agenda was the shoulder tabs. Now, a big thing throughout this project is my lack of fabric. If you watch my last video, you will have heard me go on and on and on about the fact that I didn't have enough fabric and what I had to do to kind of make up for that problem. And so I had to make some changes to the design. I had to shorten the coat, omit the belt, things like that. And I had really hoped to keep the shoulder tabs because I think they're a very cool detail. I tried fitting the pieces in my fabric, but honestly, my offcuts were so small that I didn't have enough. I have my offcuts here. You see that it's all very thin, small pieces of fabric, which, to be fair, is kind of a testament at how nicely I managed to cut everything out without having too much waste. So it's a positive, but also annoying because I didn't have enough fabric. I found a solution. I made the bottom out of this fabric, which I also used for the undercolor. I managed to make the shoulder tabs, but as I pinned them on, it looked completely out of balance with the rest of the coat. I think because I shortened it, the proportions really changed quite a lot. And having the shoulder tabs on a shortened coat just looked completely off balance to me. So in the end, I decided to take away the shoulder tabs, not add them, and hopefully in the future I can make a full-length version with shoulder tabs because I really think it looks super cool. Moving on from the shoulder tabs was the collar. I always love a collar construction. I also love sewing that on a shirt or a polo or a dress. And this one was definitely no exception. Long live the clapper on the collar because all of these little seams lied so nice and flat as I was sewing it and pressing it. I really had a lovely time taking my time with this, not cutting any corners. And I think the instructions did a great job explaining how everything works and where to press, how to sew. It really made a very big difference to me. Because of my fabric shortage, I had to make the undercolor in a different fabric. And all in all, I think this was very much a case of like a happy little accident because I love the touch of originality it brings to the coat. Then it starts pinning the collar on the tailor's ham. I didn't do any of that. I just used this and I think it turned out fine. And then as the lapel went on, it really started to look like a coat. In total, making that whole color thing happen took 4 hours. So quite a lot of time, but absolutely worth slowing down for this. The instructions were super clear to me. For example, it tells you how to trim the seam allowance so that you can manipulate how the color falls. It's called the turn of the cloth, which is also a beautiful word, I think, or phrase. Because your front collar lies open, you want to seam to roll over slightly so that you don't have like a very visible line. And that just shows how much the pattern designer cares and how much thought goes into making this pattern, and how it really wants you to have a professional looking product at the end, or coat at the end. And yeah, it does that beautifully. And yeah, I just love it. Now, the high of that second sewing day completely crashed the next time I was sewing, because a few days later, 6th of January, I had a very down sewing day. Those happen as well. I wanted to sew the hem, but then the hems didn't really match up. My first mistake was to sew when I was tired and hungry. That's always a mistake. I should have sat myself down and have a chill evening instead of working on this quite complicated sewing project. You live and you learn. My second mistake of the day was to chop off something when I was tired and hungry. Because it didn't line up, I decided to chop off some of it. I was completely spiraling and overthinking everything, thinking I completely messed up the whole coat. And then my first good decision was to set it aside and go chill. All right, guys, I have cut myself, burned myself, made mistakes. Something of my hems is not matching up. I think I need to take the sign and decide this is not my day and stop sewing. It's not the full moon, so it must be something else, but I clearly need to come back to it another day. So yeah, I am going to hang this back up, play a video game, and go to bed early. And then I can come back to it another day with a fresh mind, and hopefully the big problems that I'm seeing now will not seem as huge. Alright, thank you for sticking with me. I will see you later. On the 11th of January, I went back with fresh eyes and it turned out my big hem problem was kind of insignificant. I managed to rectify it all, and granted, it wasn't exactly like how the pattern tells you to do things, but you know, I found a solution. I managed to sew the hem quite neatly and there was no problem anymore. Yay! However, I didn't want to push my luck. I wanted to take it chill today. So I just did the hand stitching or the basting of the collar pieces, and then also the hand stitching of the lapel roll line, which was another technique that I had never heard of, but it was great. And I was watching a series on the couch. Sometimes that's all you need, you know? And that took about 40 minutes. That goes to show sometimes a short sewing session is also nice. It doesn't always have to be like 4+ hours. So the 15th of January, I started on the lining. First, I cut out the pattern pieces out of the paper pattern. Then I cut out the fabric pieces, added all the notches, and I was so relieved because I had just enough fabric to put it all in there. So I was already panicking a little bit, thinking, oh my god, I don't have enough lining fabric, here we go again. But actually, I was fine. I was able to just squeeze it in, so crisis averted. Then there was the weird and scary step of cutting off one side of the vent. That kind of went really well. So again, the pattern really takes you along and tries to make it as easy as possible, I think. Then I sewed the center back, and then there's this super cool back pleat to give you a little bit more room when you wear the coat. And for some reason that was extremely satisfying to sew and press. I don't know if that's just me, but these are kind of details that I love. Again, she really thought about the practicality and the small details that make this coat extra special. And in total, I sewed for about an hour and a half, which is actually not that much for all of the work that I did that day. And then I tried it on and admired the work that I had put in so far, and also how fast it was actually starting to go. Although it can be a bit misleading sometimes, because sometimes it's going really fast in the beginning and then it's all the small detail work that takes up a lot of time at the end. So yeah, I was trying to pace myself a little bit, but I was so excited. Sorry, the doorbell rang. My seeds for my garden arrived. Moving on. Then 16th of January, another pretty chill sewing session. I sewed more of the lining. There was one small hiccup with sewing the back vent. I think I must have mixed something up and then it got all twisted. It was a bit strange. You really do have to keep your attention when sewing this lining, because it's very quick and easy to get it all twisted up. There was no problem. I just unpicked it and sewed it again, and then it turned out fine. But yeah, it's important to keep sharp when sewing. This is one of those places where it kind of broke my brain to wrap around these instructions, but then the step-by-step sewing video really helped with that, so it turned out fine. And after 2.5 hours, the lining was attached to the coat, which was super exciting. Another big milestone checked off, I think. Then I had a few days where I had very short sewing sessions. I had set myself the objective of sewing every day, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. And I really enjoyed how that went. So the 19th of January, I sewed in the lining and added the armhole stoppers, I think they're called. They're such a great idea. It's just small tabs that you sew into the coat so that your lining doesn't wander off and kind of stays put in the place where it needs to be as you wear your coat. Great idea, a little bit difficult to sew on. It was not very easy to know where to sew them and how, and not get them twisted. In the end, it worked. I don't know if I sewed it exactly like intended, but you know, it works, so we're going to be happy with that. On the 20th of January, I was attaching the lining to the hemline. Now, when I cut up my fabric, I must have cut it a bit short, and so I couldn't attach it the same way or the way that the pattern tells you to attach the lining. Maybe by shortening the length of the coat, I kind of messed up some changes in the patterns. I don't know. In the end, I kind of just folded over the raw edge of my lining hem and hand sewed it to the main fabric, and hopefully it's strong enough. If not, I might have to reinforce it with a few extra stitches. But it kind of worked well, and I don't think you can tell that it's not exactly how it's supposed to be. Then I also top stitched all around the lapel and the fronts. That was very satisfying to do. I really enjoyed that. The next day, I looked at the work that I had been doing. I was very happy about it, but one thing that was standing out was my back vent. It was not really lying flat very nicely, and it seemed to pull a little bit, so it didn't look very nice. I tried to fix it, which was a bit frustrating. I had to undo some stuff, hand sew some parts to have a bit more control over the fabrics and where you sew, because sometimes getting those tiny little pieces under your machine with like a big coat attached to it is not very easy, and hand sewing was a little bit easier to have a bit more control, I think. And then I just applied lots of steam to it, pressed it, and it looks a bit better. It's still not perfectly flat, but if I don't tell anyone, nobody will know. Now that the lining was all in, it was time for some cute details. As promised, there are some hidden details in the coat, and one of them is an inside pocket. My partner, as I was sewing the coat, asked me, "Oh, and so will you have inside pockets?" And I was like, "No, but now I want one." And I couldn't get that idea out of my head. And I kept thinking about it, but as we have established, I didn't have enough fabric to make like a big pocket on the inside. I did some puzzling, and with the offcuts that I had, I managed to make a very small little pocket, big enough for some keys and a credit card maybe. Not much else, but also a perfect spot to add some labels, which is always nice. Sewed it by hand because I didn't want it to be visible on the outside of the coat, and it's pretty sturdy actually, so I'm very happy that I did add it. Even though it's a very small pocket, it's a pocket and it has my labels on it, and it's very nice. Because yeah, sewing an inside pocket when your coat is basically already fully assembled is not the best order of operations, I think. I also added another very functional detail, and that's the hanging tab or hanging loop. The pattern gives you a way of doing that. It's very straightforward, surprisingly strong, and yeah, very practical again. Although I don't know if I'm the only one, but I rarely hang my coat by the hanging loop. Usually I kind of drape it on top of something. I don't know if that's very bad for like the neckline or something, but yeah, I don't know why, I've always had that. And then the last day that I sewed was on the 24th of January, so almost October, November, December. 4 months, almost 4 months after starting this project, I finally arrived at basically the last step, and that's sewing the buttons. Can I just say that I'm very proud that I didn't start wearing my coat when it didn't have buttons yet. I was very tempted because it basically looked like a coat that was ready to be worn. But I knew that if I started wearing this coat without having finished all of the buttons and all of the details that I wanted to add, I would never really finish the coat. I don't know why that is. It seems like there's some kind of sewing law, at least for me. If I am making something and I start wearing it before finishing it completely, the chances of me finishing it are very small. I'm also proud that I didn't just slap on some buttons at the end of last night's sewing session. Instead, I decided to sleep on it, not start sewing on buttons when it's way too late and I'm way too tired, but sleep on it and go back to it with a fresh head. I'm proud of that because I know myself, and with other projects I've definitely done that, like I'll quickly finish it and then it's done. And here I didn't. I decided to put it aside and come back to it the next day. So yeah, I call that growth. So in the end, I had to change the positions of the buttons quite a lot. So what I did was first I transferred the button and buttonhole placement from the pattern to my fabric. I just used pins for that. I tried it on and it looked completely off balance, probably because I shortened the coat and now I had buttons that looked way too low on the coat. So I put on the coat and tried to find the perfect position by placing pins as I was wearing it. And in the end, it ended up much higher than the original placement of the buttons and buttonholes. I measured again and again to make sure that the placement was symmetrical and well placed. And I love the final placement of my buttons. I think it looks much more in proportion, and I'm really glad that I took the time to try it on and remeasure and remeasure. I think it was really worth the time. The pattern also includes a little button on the inside. And that makes it that when you have your overlapped pieces, it lies nice and flat. It's a great way to have it look nice. However, I don't know if it's just me, but buttoning that little inside button is so awkward and very difficult. I don't know why. I think maybe just the way you have to angle everything. I do have to say, now that I've been wearing the coat for 2 or 3 weeks, it's starting to be a bit easier because the button shank and the buttonhole have eased up a little bit or become a bit more flexible or relaxed a bit. But yeah, it's still a bit awkward to button that. I don't know, maybe it's just a skill issue. Then I just had one more thing that I wanted to add, and it was just to make it extra personal and extra special. I wanted to add a hand embroidered detail of the year that I made it in. I used some water soluble transfer paper to have a guide. It's definitely a little bit wonky and not perfect. It's not super readable, but I know it's there. And yeah, I love it. I love that it's a little bit wonky. I love that it's very personal. And in my head, I can picture, like in many, many years, someone of the family will find it and they'll be like, oh my God, this was made in 2026. That's so old. Alright, so the coat is done. I promised some overview of the timing and the budget. In total, I spent roughly 35 hours on this project. And that's not including all the inspiration and research work. So 35 hours in total, 12 hours on the prep work, and 32 hours on the... That's incorrect. 23 hours on the actual sewing. So yeah, definitely a big endeavor. One of the biggest projects I have ever done. I think I would do it again, just not immediately. Right now I am needing and craving some fast projects. But yeah, I'm so happy I did it. I learned so much, so many new techniques. And I also learned a little bit about myself when sewing this, because I really feel like I discovered another sewist in me. The sewist that can be patient, that can do everything by the book, not cut any corners. And yeah, it's nice to discover that she's also in there somewhere. Then let's talk about the budget. First of all, I spent 14 euros on the pattern, 10 euros 50 to have it printed on A0 sheets. For the fabric, I bought this fabric secondhand 5 or 6 years ago. And I spent around 9 euros on the 2.5 meters of fabric. Now, if I had bought this completely new, like new fabric and with the sustainability standard that I look for, I would have easily paid like 100 to 150 euros extra. So take that into account. Then the lining was 3 euros, also secondhand. The interfacing was 36 euros, the stay tape 2.6 euros, 7 euros for the buttons, and roughly 25 cents on the labels. I have my labels made at Wonder Label. I do have an affiliate link if you are interested in making your own. But in total, that means that I spent 82 euros and 35 cents on materials for this coat. That's not including any time that I spent on it. And again, if I had bought new fabrics with the sustainability that I have in mind when I buy fabrics, it would have easily been like 100, 150 euros more. So when people say you must save a lot of money when you make your own clothing, that is very relative and usually not true. But that's also not at all the point. I don't do this to save money. I do it because I want to learn how to make clothing and I want to know what goes into making, for example, a tailored wool coat. And yeah, for me, it's worth it. So if you've been on the fence on making a coat, I would highly recommend it, but it's good to go in with a little bit of knowledge, I think. So yeah, that is my little wrap up. I hope this video was interesting to you. It was definitely a labor of love to film all of this and to edit it all. By now, spring is in the country, so it's starting to warm up a little bit. I'm not sure how often I'll be able to wear my coat. Now, to be fair, spring here can be still quite cold, so I hope I can get a little bit of wear out of it before storing it away until next autumn. But yeah, spring is around the corner, which is very exciting, and I have to start thinking about my spring sewing plans. Anyway, I hope you are well. I hope you get some crafting in, whether it is for a little bit of escapism in this crazy world or a form of activism in this world. Crafting can do both. I hope to see you on here sometime soon. You can always subscribe if you're curious for more projects. And thank you for watching. Goodbye!